What happens when you stop letting everything get to you? Think about that for a second. When someone throws a rude comment your way, when life pushes every wrong button, when the world seems to test your patience on purpose, most people explode. They snap, argue, lash out, defend, and for what? A moment of emotional relief that costs them their peace, their image, their power. But what if you didn't? What if you chose stillness instead of noise, silence instead of shouting, calm instead of chaos? What if, when they expected a reaction, you gave them nothing? That's power. That's control. That's the edge most people never learn to sharpen, because society glorifies being loud, responding fast, firing back, making a scene. But true strength, it's the person who doesn't flinch, doesn't fold, doesn't let the world decide how they'll feel. Not reacting isn't about weakness, it's about wisdom. It's the ability to see through the fog of emotion and realize, this doesn't deserve me. Not my energy, not my time, not my peace. You don't win by reacting. You win by refusing to give away your control. The moment you choose not to react, you change everything. You break the chain, you shift the dynamic. Suddenly, the person trying to control you loses power. The situation that was meant to shake you falls flat. Because you've made a choice, I don't answer to chaos. I answer to purpose. And purpose doesn't yell, purpose doesn't panic. It doesn't chase noise or respond to nonsense. It moves quietly with intent. It chooses silence not out of fear, but out of strength. Because not everything requires your voice. Not every moment deserves your energy. Some things only exist to pull you down, and your reaction is their fuel. Every time you react out of emotion, you hand over control. You let someone else steer your peace. And the truth is, most people aren't trying to understand you. They're trying to provoke you, trying to get a rise out of you, trying to pull you into their mess because they're drowning in it themselves. But when you stay calm, when you hold your fire, something incredible happens. You stand out. You rise. You become the one with presence, with power, because people start to realize you don't move for noise, you're not easy to shake, you're not like the rest. And that quiet strength, it's magnetic, it's rare, it's unforgettable. The world will start to watch you differently when you stop reacting, when you pause instead of pounce, when you observe instead of overreact, or when you learn to say nothing and let silence say everything. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming unshakable. When you master your reactions, you master your life. You make better decisions. You protect your energy. You stop wasting time on people and problems that don't deserve your attention. You become the one in control. That's the reward. That's why this matters. Because the person who doesn't react is the person who owns their power. They don't explain. They don't argue. They don't chase validation. They just keep moving forward, calm, clear, focused, and people notice. They notice the discipline, the maturity, the self-respect, and more than anything, they notice that no matter how loud the world gets, you don't flinch, because your peace is louder than their chaos. So if you're tired of feeling controlled, manipulated, drained, start here. Start with stillness, with breath, with pause. Train your mind to step back before it strikes. Remind yourself that you are not obligated to respond. Not every provocation deserves a reaction. When you stop reacting, you stop bleeding energy. You stop giving pieces of yourself to people who haven't earned them. You start living from strength, not emotion. And that's when the real shift begins. You begin to move differently, think differently, command rooms with silence, not noise. And most importantly, you stop being a puppet to the world's chaos and start becoming the architect of your peace. Because in a world addicted to reaction, calm is a revolution. The urge to react isn't random. It's wired deep into your brain. It comes from survival instincts passed down for generations. The mind sees conflict as danger. A raised voice, a harsh word, a challenge to your pride, it triggers something ancient inside you. That fight or flight response, that fire in your chest, that storm behind your eyes. And before you know it, you're saying things you don't mean, doing things you regret, giving them exactly what they wanted, your reaction. But the mind isn't always right. It confuses discomfort with threat. It makes you believe that silence is surrender, that restraint is weakness, that walking away means losing. That's a lie. The ego feeds it. It whispers that you have to respond, you have to defend, you have to prove something. But prove what? And to who? Half the time, the people you're reacting to don't even matter. They don't care about your truth. They don't want resolution. They want control. This is how the ego traps you. It convinces you that your value is tied to how loudly you fight back. But real value needs no defense. It just is. You don't need to explain your worth. You don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. Let people talk. Let them assume. Let them be wrong. Peace is more powerful than proving a point. When you understand this, everything changes. You start catching yourself in the moment. You feel the trigger, the heat rising, the emotions boiling, but you don't act. You observe. You breathe. You ask yourself, what am I really protecting right now, my pride or my peace? And almost every time, it's pride. Pride that doesn't like to be challenged. Pride that wants the last word. Pride that pretends it's strength but crumbles without attention. But peace doesn't need validation. It doesn't need the last word. It just walks away, intact, untouched, undisturbed. Because when you choose not to react, you choose to protect your energy. And protecting your energy is an act of self-love. It's how you tell yourself, I matter too much to be thrown around by things that don't build me. The world is filled with noise. People projecting their pain, their insecurity, their fear. And if you react to all of it, you become part of it. You drown in it. But if you stay centered, if you remain still, you rise above it. Not in arrogance, but in clarity. Not in silence that hides fear, but in silence that radiates power. Every reaction is a transaction. You give away a piece of your presence for a moment of emotional expression. But what if that expression costs you your peace, your focus, your dignity? Not reacting doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've learned how to feel without letting emotions make decisions for you. That's emotional intelligence. That's leadership. That's growth. And growth never looks loud. It's not a dramatic outburst or a show of strength. It's the quiet decision to hold yourself to a higher standard, to not let anger be your language, to not let impulsiveness be your identity. Growth is when you realize your response is your responsibility, and silence, when chosen consciously, is not absence, it's presence. It's choosing to let your maturity speak for you. You don't owe anyone your reaction. Not every comment deserves a reply. Not every challenge deserves attention. Let them say what they want. Let them expect the same old version of you. Then shock them with your calm. Surprise them with your stillness. Make them question their noise because of your quiet. You don't have to match their energy. You're not here to be dragged into other people's storms. You're here to be the calm that calms storms, the peace that disarms chaos, the stillness that silences loud insecurity. And yes, it takes strength. It takes discipline. It takes rewiring your instincts, breaking the ego's grip, and building a new identity, one where your reactions are no longer automatic, but intentional. One where your power is no longer borrowed from anger, but rooted in awareness. That's the person who wins. Not the loudest, not the most aggressive, but the one who stays grounded when everything else shakes. The one who sees the trap, but doesn't step into it. The one who hears the insult, but doesn't take it personally. Because they know what someone says is a reflection of them, not you. You don't need to respond to disrespect to prove your strength. Your strength is proven by your ability to remain calm in the face of it. That's what they'll remember. That's what will echo long after the noise fades. The one who didn't fold, didn't flinch, didn't fall into the trap. Let your silence be your standard. Let your calm be your boundary. Let your peace be the wall that noise can't penetrate. You don't have to react to reclaim control. You already have it. You just have to choose not to give it away. The less you react, the more you begin to notice. You start to see how much of the world is just noise. People talking without listening, arguing without understanding, acting out of insecurity and calling it confidence. The more silent you become, the more clearly you see the games, the manipulation, the bait, the fake outrage, the fake urgency, the fake connection. And suddenly you realize you used to get pulled into all of it. You used to think you had to respond, that you had to explain yourself, that you had to convince people who were never really interested in understanding you. That illusion breaks the moment you stay still and observe instead of react. The moment you no longer dance to the chaos around you, you step into your own rhythm. A rhythm grounded in clarity, not confusion, in purpose, not pressure. And the more you live in that space, the more you reclaim yourself, your time, your thoughts, your focus, because reaction is what they want. It keeps you distracted. It keeps you emotionally hijacked. If they can control how you feel, they control how you act. And if they control how you act, they control your direction. But when you rise above reaction, you become impossible to manipulate. You become untouchable. Not because you fight back harder, but because nothing outside of you can pull you off your path. There is a difference between power and performance. Power is silent. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to be loud to be felt. It doesn't need attention to be real. Performance, on the other hand, is fragile. It's loud because it's insecure. It demands reaction because it thrives on attention. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding performance. And what you stop feeding, you starve. You begin to stand taller, not in arrogance, but in awareness. You no longer shrink to make others comfortable, and you no longer flare up to defend your pride. You become comfortable with being misunderstood. You stop chasing clarity from people committed to confusion. You stop wasting explanations on those who twist your words just to validate their ego. That's freedom. That's when your energy is no longer scattered. It's focused. It's deliberate. And you'll start to feel the shift, not just in your interactions, but in your mind. You'll start thinking clearer. You'll feel less strained. You'll notice you don't carry the weight of other people's opinions the way you used to. You no longer live in reaction. You live in alignment. It's not about becoming passive. It's about becoming precise. Not everything deserves your voice, but when you do speak, it will come from strength, not emotion, not from a place of needing to prove something, but from a place of knowing who you are. That's the kind of voice that moves things. That's the kind of presence that turns heads, not because it demands attention, but because it doesn't. The world will always push your buttons. It will always test you. People will always find new ways to poke at your insecurities, challenge your patience, and try to shake your confidence. But your power lies in how little you allow them to affect your inner world. You don't have to build walls. You just have to build awareness. You don't have to become cold. You just have to become conscious. When your peace becomes your priority, you become a different kind of force. You no longer rush to be seen or heard. You no longer carry the burden of reaction. You sit in your calm and let the world adjust to your silence. And it does. It will. Because calm energy disrupts. It unsettles people who rely on chaos to feel relevant. They won't know what to do with you. They'll try harder to provoke you. They'll misread your silence as weakness, but let them. That's their lesson, not yours. Your lesson is to stay anchored, to stay still in the storm, to know that you've outgrown the need to react, and you've stepped into something far more powerful, command over yourself. And that kind of command is rare. It takes practice. It takes awareness. It takes courage. But once you claim it, you'll never want to go back. You'll see what it's like to live undisturbed, to walk into a room and not scan for threats, but radiate peace, to be in conflict and still keep your integrity intact, to know your presence is loud enough. Even when your mouth stays shut, that's who you're becoming. Someone whose strength isn't in how they react, but in how they stay rooted. Someone who doesn't break under pressure, but sharpens in silence. Someone who doesn't rise to the noise, but above it. Silence is not the absence of strength. It is the presence of mastery. When you stop reacting, you begin leading, not others, but yourself. You take back the wheel from impulse. You stop being driven by emotion and start moving with intention. You realize that every reaction is a choice. And when you no longer give that choice away to your anger, to your frustration, to your pride, you begin to walk in a different kind of authority. Quiet, focused, unshaken. Most people live in emotional autopilot. Someone disrespects them, they explode. Something doesn't go their way, they spiral. Life pushes back and they fall apart because they've never learned to pause, never learned to sit with the fire without letting it consume them. But the ones who rise above that, the ones who master the pause, they become untouchable. That pause between the trigger and the response, it's where your power is. It's in that space that you reclaim control. It's where you decide what kind of person you want to be. Not the kind who gets dragged into chaos. Not the kind who responds to every insult like it's a command. But the kind who pauses, breathes, and chooses their next move. That's what makes you dangerous in the best way. Because when you don't react, you can't be manipulated. You're not controlled by other people's opinions. You're not swayed by drama, not hijacked by urgency, not pulled into battles that don't align with your vision. You protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. And when you do that, you rise into a new level of discipline. Discipline is not just about waking up early or grinding every day. It's about choosing maturity over ego, clarity over chaos, silence over noise. And it's not easy. It takes mental muscle to stay calm when everything in you wants to react. It takes strength to hold your fire, but every time you do, you build something unshakable within yourself, something real, something solid. That inner stillness becomes your anchor. You begin to understand that peace isn't something you find, it's something you create. It's not waiting for life to calm down. It's learning to stay calm regardless of what life does. You stop expecting the world to hand you peace and start becoming the kind of person who carries it within. And the world notices, it always does. People start to treat you differently when you carry yourself like someone who doesn't need to respond to everything. You become the one who sees everything but says little, the one who listens more than they speak. The one who observes, thinks, calculates, but only speaks when it adds value, when it serves growth, when it reflects who you are, not who they want you to be. That's the kind of presence that commands respect without demanding it. That's the kind of energy that people remember. Not because it was loud, but because it was stable, centered, grounded. You don't chase validation. You don't need to win arguments. You don't need to shout to be heard, because your calm already speaks louder than most people's noise. And when you truly embody that, life begins to shift. Opportunities come to those who can stay level-headed. Leadership gravitates to those who can stay calm under pressure. Respect grows for those who don't give in to every emotion that rises. People trust those who stay steady, because in a chaotic world, steady is rare. Steady is powerful. Steady is what wins. But you have to choose it every single day. You have to choose not to react when it would be easier to fight back. You have to choose the pause when everything in you wants to snap. You have to choose peace when pride is screaming for revenge. That's the real work. That's the real strength. It's not flashy. It's not loud, but it's transformative. Because over time, your silence becomes discipline. Your discipline becomes character, and your character becomes legacy. People won't remember the noise you avoided. They'll remember the strength it took to stay still. They'll remember the way you held your ground without raising your voice. They'll remember the presence you carried, unshaken, unwavering, undeniable, so that next time life tries to pull you into the storm, pause, breathe, remember who you are. You are not here to react. You are here to rise. You are not here to match their chaos. You are here to hold your peace. You are not here to explain your worth. You are here to walk in it. Let them throw their words. Let the noise surround you. Let the pressure build. And let your silence remind them, this is what power looks like. Every time you stay calm in a moment that used to trigger you, you prove to yourself that you've grown. You're no longer a slave to impulse. You're no longer reacting just because your emotions tell you to. You're making a statement. I'm not who I used to be. And that's a powerful shift, because growth is not measured by how much louder you get. It's measured by how much quieter you become when noise surrounds you. There is a certain dignity and restraint. Not everything that hurts you deserves your energy. Not everything that challenges you is worth your time. When you choose to hold back, you're not backing down. You're leveling up. You're saying, my peace is worth more than this battle. And that's a truth most people never learn because they're too busy chasing temporary victories. But winning a petty argument while losing your calm is not victory. It's loss disguised as pride. You have to see the bigger picture. Every time you react, you build a habit. And every time you resist, you build a new pattern. You teach your brain that it doesn't have to fire back, doesn't have to defend every wound, doesn't have to be at war with every shadow. You break the cycle. You retrain your mind. You take back authority over your reactions. And that's what makes you powerful. Not your ability to strike, but your ability to choose when not to. Anyone can yell. Anyone can lash out. That takes no discipline. But to stay still while your ego is burning, to keep your head when everything inside you is shaking, that's power. That's self-control. That's ownership. Because the world doesn't need more noise, it needs more clarity. It needs more people who know how to stay composed when everything goes sideways. It needs people who know how to handle disrespect with grace, not with chaos. That's the kind of presence that sets you apart, not because you try to stand out, but because you don't get pulled in. You rise by staying rooted. And it's not about being passive or emotionless. It's about being intentional. It's about knowing that not every fight is yours to fight. Some things are beneath you. Some words are meant to provoke. Some challenges are distractions dressed as invitations. And when you respond to everything, you become predictable, easy to read, easy to control. But when you're selective, when you respond from strength, not from impulse, you become unreadable, unshakable. And that makes you impossible to manipulate. That's where your edge is. in your unpredictability, in your emotional discipline, in your ability to remain unmoved even when everything tries to move you. That's when people start to feel your presence before you speak. That's when silence becomes your loudest answer. Because silence, when intentional, speaks volumes. It says, I am in control. It says, I don't chase chaos. It says, I've outgrown the need to react. Let that be your standard. Let your calm be your statement. Let your silence be your strength. Because when you stop reacting, you start conserving. You save your energy for the things that truly matter. You stop leaking power through pointless conversations and start channeling it into meaningful progress. Your mind clears. Your path sharpens. You become focused, not scattered, not flustered, not emotionally hijacked. That's how leaders are built. That's how warriors are forged, not by fighting every battle, but by mastering the art of choosing which battles are worth it. And most of the time, the battle is not out there. It's in you. It's the voice that says, don't let that go. Say something. Defend yourself. But you don't always have to, because silence doesn't mean surrender. It means you're focused on the war, not the noise of every little skirmish. Every moment you choose not to react, you choose evolution. You choose peace over pride, power over panic, growth over gratification. That's how you separate yourself. That's how you rise. Not by doing what everyone else does, but by doing what most people can't. So don't fear being misunderstood. Don't rush to correct every false perception. Don't break your calm just to fix someone's misjudgment of you. Let them talk. Let them assume. Let them underestimate. That's not your problem. That's their reality. Yours is to stay focused. Yours is to stay grounded. Yours is to rise so high that noise can't reach you. And if they ever wonder why you didn't react, let your results be the reply. Let your peace be your proof. Let your presence be the reminder that you don't need to play every game to prove your strength. Because the most powerful move isn't always to respond. It's to rise in silence and let your discipline speak for itself. There's a difference between staying silent because you're afraid and staying silent because you're above it. One comes from weakness, the other from wisdom. One avoids conflict, the other commands respect without needing confrontation. And if you've come far enough to hold your tongue when pride begs you to speak, then you're already walking the path most will never have the discipline to take. Reaction is easy, it's instant. It satisfies your ego for a second, but then leaves you empty. It feels like a win in the moment, but it's hollow. It takes no effort to argue, no strength to yell back, no courage to defend your pride. But restraint is a skill. It's a muscle. And every time you flex it, you get stronger. Not on the outside, but deep within, where real power lives. The world doesn't reward the loudest voice. It remembers the one who stood still when everyone else was shaking. The one who didn't stoop to petty battles. The one who didn't let provocation define their behavior. You don't get ahead by reacting to everything. You get ahead by deciding what deserves your energy and what deserves your silence. And more often than not, silence is the smarter choice. When you hold back, you give yourself time to see what's real, to see what matters, to recognize what's bait and what's truth. And most of the time, what feels like a personal attack is nothing more than someone projecting their own battles onto you. People don't speak from clarity. They speak from wounds, from fear, from insecurity. And when you realize that, you stop personalizing everything. You stop letting other people's chaos disturb your inner world. That's where you start winning, not on the surface, but in the core of who you are. You build a life where peace isn't something you seek, it's something you become. And when peace becomes your identity, everything changes. You think clearer. You speak with intention. You walk with presence. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop justifying your calm to those addicted to noise. You become untouchable, not because you have nothing to lose, but because you refuse to lose yourself. That's the real danger of reaction. Every time you give in, you give a piece of yourself away. A piece of your discipline. A piece of your clarity. And eventually, your identity gets shaped by what you're reacting to instead of what you're choosing to become. But when you learn to let go, when you learn to watch chaos unfold without being pulled into it, you unlock something few people ever discover, self-mastery. That ability to sit with discomfort, to breathe through tension, to hold your position when everything is trying to move you. That's not weakness, that's dominance. Dominance over self. And that's the highest level of power there is. Because the strongest one in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who doesn't need the room to know how strong they are. It's the one who walks away without saying a word and still leaves an impact. The one whose silence echoes louder than another man's scream. The one who doesn't react, not because they're unaware, but because they've already made peace with the fact that not every battle is worth their time. And if you've ever felt the pull to lash out, to prove a point, to make them understand, just remember, understanding is not your obligation. Peace is your priority. You don't need to prove who you are to those too blind to see it. Your energy is sacred. Your growth is sacred. And nothing is worth sacrificing that. You're not here to be liked by everyone. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to evolve. And that evolution requires a new level of silence, a new level of stillness, one that doesn't run from noise but stands unaffected by it. That's where your next level lives, not in more reaction, but in more control. Let them wonder why you didn't respond. Let them try harder to get a rise out of you. Let them misread your silence as weakness. Because the longer you stay grounded, the more they'll see it for what it really is. Strength. The kind of strength that doesn't need approval. The kind of strength that doesn't bend for pressure. The kind of strength that speaks loudest when it says nothing at all. That's the version of you they never expected. The one who doesn't flinch, doesn't fall apart, doesn't trade peace for pride. That's the version of you who's ready for everything ahead. Not because they've learned to fight harder, but because they've learned to rise higher. You rise higher the moment you stop trying to match energy and start preserving your own. You stop dancing to the rhythm of disrespect. You stop entertaining drama disguised as urgency. You stop giving your reactions to people who don't even deserve your attention. That's how you break free. Not by fighting louder, but by stepping out of the fight entirely. You begin to realize that not every confrontation is a challenge. Some are distractions. Some are tests to see if you'll trade your growth for validation. If you'll abandon your evolution just to feel right for a moment. But you're not here for moments. You're here for mastery. You're here to go further, move wiser, and live on your own terms. And those terms do not include giving away your peace just to satisfy your ego. There's nothing to prove when you know who you are. There's nothing to defend when your character speaks louder than accusations. There's nothing to react to when your purpose is louder than their noise. This is where true freedom begins. When your actions are no longer dictated by their words. When your inner world stays calm no matter how loud the outside gets. That's the shift. That's the level where most people never arrive because they're still caught in the trap of needing to be heard instead of choosing to be unbothered. You can feel the pull to respond and still not move. You can feel the fire rise and still not burn the bridge. Self-control isn't about never feeling anger or frustration. It's about having the discipline to choose what builds you instead of what drains you. And every moment you choose stillness, you reinforce your standard. You remind yourself that your peace is permanent, not seasonal, not situational, not up for negotiation. People will try to test that. Life will push. Situations will come designed to press every button. And in those moments, your old self will beg for a reaction. Your pride will whisper, don't let that slide. But pause and ask yourself, what does it cost? Every reaction is a transaction. It either buys you clarity or it robs you of peace. Choose wisely. You're not walking this path to stay the same. You're walking it to become the kind of person who leads themselves first, who doesn't need to clap back because they've already stepped up, who doesn't get lost in the emotion of the moment because they're grounded in the purpose of their future. And that future has no room for petty arguments, senseless reactions, or energy leaks disguised as responses. If someone thinks silence is weakness, let them. If they think calmness means fear, let them. What they think is none of your business. What you protect is. Your energy is currency. Don't spend it on things that offer no return. Your mind is space. Don't rent it out to every insult or opinion. And your time is limited. Don't waste it proving yourself to people who never mattered in the first place. This is how you separate yourself. While others argue, you build. While others react, you reflect. While others lose sleep over small things, you rest in your ability to let go. And with every day, your focus sharpens. Your vision clears. Your energy compounds. Because nothing slows you down like emotional reactivity. And nothing speeds you up like mental discipline. Every second you choose not to react is a second you spend in control. That control is what creates momentum. That momentum builds confidence, and that confidence becomes your edge, silent, grounded, unshakable. You start to walk into rooms differently, not to be seen, but because your presence can't be ignored. Not to dominate, but because your self-control speaks louder than any display of force ever could. That's what strength really is. Not in how quick you are to speak, but in how calm you remain when everything begs for a reaction. Not in how many people you can shut down, but in how few people can break your peace. Because when you no longer respond out of habit, you start responding with purpose. And purpose never argues, it never begs, it never panics. It simply continues, relentless, focused, and undisturbed. Let that be the energy you bring. Let that be the standard you live by. You are not here to react, you are here to rise, not through resistance, but through restraint. Not through control of others, but through control of self. This is what makes you unstoppable. This is what separates noise from power. And once you've tasted that power, the quiet kind, the kind rooted in clarity and presence, you'll never again feel the need to explain, defend, or retaliate. Because you'll know true strength doesn't react. It simply holds its ground and moves forward. There's a level of growth where silence becomes your default. Not because you have nothing to say, but because what you could say no longer serves your evolution. You begin to value peace so deeply that chaos no longer excites you. The things that once pulled you into conflict lose their grip, and not because they got easier, but because you got stronger. You've trained yourself to recognize the difference between battles that shape you and battles that drain you. The difference between truth that deserves your voice and noise that craves your attention. You've seen how easy it is to fall into the habit of reaction, but now you choose precision. You've become the kind of person who doesn't speak to defend, but to build, who doesn't reply to nonsense, but to purpose. And that shift changes everything. You become dangerous in the best way. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're composed, because you move with intent, because you carry your calm like armor. The kind of calm that makes people second guess their chaos, the kind of silence that makes noise irrelevant. That's the level where real power lives, beneath the surface, controlled, stable, untouchable. The moment you stop being easily triggered, you become less predictable. And when you're less predictable, you're harder to control. That's why emotional control is power. It's the quiet weapon that makes you immune to manipulation. They can say what they want, do what they want, stir the pot, press the buttons, raise the volume. But if you don't move, they lose their grip. Because control only works when you hand over your reaction. And if you're not reacting, you're winning. Not in the loud, dramatic way the world defines victory, but in the quiet, disciplined way that builds real momentum. The kind that makes you resilient, focused, committed to the bigger picture. You stop needing to clap back because you're too busy leveling up. You stop proving your value because your actions already speak. This is where discipline becomes identity. You no longer practice emotional control, you embody it. It becomes who you are, not just something you do. You think before you respond. You pause before you speak. You reflect before you engage. And that pause, that split second of intentional silence, it separates those who lead their lives from those who get led by their emotions. Every time you choose to hold back, you reinforce the truth that you are not ruled by impulse, you are ruled by purpose. You don't react to prove a point, you stay still to protect your power. And with every decision, you build a life that doesn't need to be defended. It just needs to be lived, fully, powerfully, intentionally. You begin to realize that not reacting isn't just about self-control. It's about elevation. It's about rising into a version of yourself that no longer chases comfort through chaos, that no longer seeks validation through noise, that no longer wastes time responding to people committed to misunderstanding you. Silence becomes your separation, stillness becomes your strength, and discipline becomes your identity. You're no longer the person who gets pulled into everything. You've become the person who chooses where their energy flows, the person who walks away without the need to be right, the person who holds their peace like a sword, sharp, quiet, powerful. That's how you protect your vision. That's how you protect your future. Not by arguing about your value, but by living it. You have to know who you are so deeply that not reacting feels more powerful than winning an argument. So deeply that silence doesn't feel like losing. It feels like choosing. Choosing maturity over ego, choosing purpose over pride, choosing the life you're building over the emotions trying to pull you away from it. And the more you choose it, the more you sharpen it, until it becomes second nature, until people can't get under your skin because there's no access anymore, until disrespect doesn't deserve a response because it no longer defines your worth, until you can hear anything, face anything, walk through anything, without letting it disrupt your internal compass. This is what sets you apart. Not talent, not noise, but control, focus, composure. The ability to stay calm when everything demands a reaction. The ability to walk away when everything dares you to engage. That's what makes you different. Or that's what makes you powerful. So keep that silence, hold that line, protect that peace. Because in a world that constantly tries to provoke you, staying unshaken isn't just strength, it's a superpower. When you no longer react to everything that pokes at you, you begin to see clearly who you really are. Not the version shaped by other people's opinions, not the one distorted by pressure or fear, but the one anchored in clarity and inner strength. You become someone who no longer gets tossed around by external noise because your identity is no longer fragile. You don't bend every time someone doubts you. You don't break every time someone disrespects you. You've built yourself from the inside out, and that version of you doesn't flinch when life tries to provoke a response. Your silence is no longer empty. It carries weight. It carries boundaries. It carries the message that you do not entertain chaos, that you no longer have time for energy that doesn't build you. Because you finally understand that every time you react to negativity, you feed it. You breathe life into what should have been ignored. And every time you stay still, you starve it. You take away its fuel. You take back your power. That's how you shift the dynamic. That's how you rise above the noise, by refusing to feed it with your energy. People will try to test that. They'll try to see if the old you is still hiding beneath your discipline. They'll say things just to get a rise out of you. But what they don't understand is that the strongest version of you no longer rises in anger. It rises in awareness. You don't lash out, you observe. You don't retaliate, you evolve. And in doing so, you keep your power while they lose theirs. This is not weakness. This is strength that's been sharpened by experience. You've fought battles that no one saw. You've stayed calm when you had every reason to break. You've swallowed words that would have won the moment but lost your peace. That's the kind of strength people underestimate until they see it doesn't flinch, until they realize their chaos doesn't move you, until they feel the discomfort of not getting the reaction they were counting on. That's the moment your silence speaks louder than words. It becomes a mirror, showing others that you won't be dragged into dysfunction, that you are no longer accessible to drama, that you are not here to compete for validation or to explain yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your life becomes your response. Your growth becomes your statement, and your progress becomes your proof. When you master this, you move differently. You begin to think long-term. You no longer chase the satisfaction of immediate retaliation because you're chasing something bigger. Inner peace, personal growth, emotional mastery. You realize that what feels good in the moment isn't always good for your future. And that clarity is what separates the average from the extraordinary. Most people live in reaction. Few rise into restraint, but those few, they lead, they influence, they build something that lasts. So ask yourself, what kind of life are you building? One that reacts to every distraction, or one that stays focused, grounded, untouchable? Because you can't have both. You can't have growth and drama. You can't build a future while fighting every small battle that crosses your path. You have to choose. You have to decide that not every comment deserves your energy. Not every confrontation deserves your time. Some things are beneath your mission. Some people are not qualified for your attention. Let them talk. Let them guess. Let them assume. You're not here to correct them. You're here to build something they'll never understand until they do the inner work themselves. And by the time they realize who you've become, it'll be too late. Because you'll be far ahead, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, not because you fought harder, but because you refuse to fight over things that didn't matter. That's how you stay focused. That's how you create a life that's aligned with your vision. You don't get there by being loud. You get there by being intentional. By letting go of the need to be right and replacing it with the desire to be free. By understanding that real power is quiet, and the loudest person in the room is often the one with the least control. You're not here to win arguments, you're here to win your life back. You're here to grow into the version of yourself that doesn't shrink in chaos, but rises above it. That doesn't beg to be heard, but stands firm in silence. That doesn't fight for attention, but commands respect through action. That's who you're becoming. That's the path you're walking. And every time you choose stillness over reaction, you take another step forward. Every time you pause instead of explode, you train your mind to be stronger than your mood. That's the work. That's the transformation. And that's what makes you unstoppable. Mastering the art of not reacting isn't just emotional control. It's a strategy that puts you in command of your energy, your decisions, and ultimately your destiny. Every time you hold back an emotional outburst, every time you resist the urge to prove someone wrong, you strengthen the muscle that will carry you through life's storms. You are not suppressing yourself. You are training yourself. You are shaping a version of you that is immune to manipulation, to provocation, to emotional sabotage. Because when you don't react, you can't be controlled. When you remain calm, you remain powerful. People often mistake reaction for strength. But reaction is impulsive. It's driven by emotion, by ego, by fear. It's loud, messy, and short-lived. True strength is calm. It's quiet. It's deliberate. It sees the game but refuses to play on someone else's terms. It understands that attention is currency, and if you're giving it away to every distraction, you're going broke. You're bankrupting your potential by spending your energy on things that don't deserve you. That's the trap most people fall into. They react to everything, and in doing so, they surrender their focus, their peace, and their progress. But the few who learn to pause, those few rise. They don't respond to every insult. They don't chase every doubt. They choose their battles, and more importantly, they walk away from battles that lead nowhere. That's intelligence. That's wisdom. That's growth. Because when you know who you are, you don't need to prove it. When you've built something real inside, you don't need validation outside. You become unmoved by petty criticism, untouched by shallow opinions. You've outgrown the need to explain yourself to people who aren't even listening. This is where your power multiplies. This is where you begin to make decisions from clarity, not emotion. This is where your patience becomes your advantage. Because in a world that's always reacting, always rushing, always triggered, the one who can pause controls the outcome. They see opportunities others miss. They act when it matters and wait when it doesn't. They don't waste time trying to control the uncontrollable. They master what they can, their mind. And the mind is everything. If you can own your reactions, you can own your future. The greatest wars are not fought with weapons. They are fought in silence between the triggers and your response. The ones who win that war walk through life with peace that others can't touch. They are trusted. They are respected. They are followed because they don't just talk about discipline. They live it. Every moment they choose silence over chaos. They reinforce their identity as someone who's not driven by emotion but led by purpose. This is not passive. This is power on a level most people never reach. It takes discipline to stay quiet when insulted. It takes strength to remain grounded when everything inside you wants to erupt. But the reward is priceless, self-respect. And from that self-respect comes self-control. And from that control comes a life most people only dream about, because it's a life not dictated by noise, but led by vision. You want to grow? Learn to observe without reacting. Learn to feel anger without becoming anger. Feel frustration without becoming irrational. Feel doubt without collapsing into fear. That's real mastery. That's what separates those who drift from those who dominate. Not talent, not luck, but control. The person who reacts lives in the moment. The person who pauses owns it. So take a deep breath. Let the noise pass through you. Let the doubt, the judgment, the criticism pass like clouds through the sky. Don't hold it or don't fight it. Let it pass and remain rooted in who you are. Because you're not here to be moved by every gust of wind. You're here to become the mountain that nothing shakes. This is your edge. This is your armor. This is your revolution. Not with noise, but with discipline. Because when you stop reacting, you stop being predictable. When you're no longer predictable, you're no longer controlled. And when you're no longer controlled, you're finally free. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them feel unsettled by your calm. Because your silence isn't weakness. It's warning. It's preparation. It's power focused inward, power that's not wasted, power that's growing. And one day that power will be undeniable, not because you shouted, not because you exploded, but because you stayed silent long enough to build something no one saw coming. You're not here to be consumed by every trigger. You're here to create, to evolve, to lead. And leadership begins the moment you stop letting emotions lead you. That's when your life starts moving in a new direction. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You chose discipline over drama, purpose over pride, stillness over storms. And from that choice, everything changes. Most people live in reaction. They're not thinking, they're flinching. They jump at criticism, explode at conflict, and panic at uncertainty. They're always in motion but never in control. That's not life. That's emotional survival. And survival is not the goal. You weren't born to just react. You were born to rise. You were born to command yourself in the face of chaos, to stand still when everything around you is shaking, and to respond not from fear, but from strength. Every time you react without thinking, you give away your edge, you give someone else the keys to your mind. And what happens when you do that enough times? You forget who's really in control. You become a puppet, your emotions pulling the strings, while your potential sleeps beneath the surface. But the moment you choose not to react, not to be baited, not to be triggered, that's the moment you take back your life. That's when you remember nothing has power over you unless you hand it over. And yet people hand it over daily, with every unnecessary argument, with every defensive outburst, with every reply that didn't need to be sent. They burn hours, days, years of their lives reacting to things that don't matter, to people who don't matter, in moments that didn't require their energy. And then they wonder why they're exhausted, why they feel lost, why they never feel in control. It's because they're bleeding energy through reactions that serve no purpose. But not you, not anymore. You've seen what emotional chaos costs. You've seen how reaction keeps you stuck in patterns that never push you forward. So you've chosen the higher ground, the harder path, the one that requires presence, the one that demands discipline. You've chosen to be the one who stays calm when others lose it, the one who breathes before responding, the one who knows the power of restraint. That's rare, that's powerful, because stillness is not emptiness, it's intelligence. Silence is not weakness, it's awareness. The more you train yourself to hold, to observe, to let the moment pass through you, the more dangerous you become. Not in a loud way, but in a way that commands respect without saying a word. In a way that walks into a room and doesn't need to prove anything, because energy speaks louder than volume. When you stop reacting, you start understanding. You begin to see what most people miss. You hear what's behind the words. You notice what's not being said. You rise above noise. You see intentions, you feel energy shifts. Because you're not clouded by anger, pride, or insecurity. You're focused, you're sharp, you're present. And that presence becomes a superpower. It gives you space to think, to act wisely, to make moves that matter. You become untouchable, not because no one challenges you, but because their challenge no longer reaches you. It bounces off the armor you built through silence, through discipline, through self-mastery. You no longer chase validation. You no longer argue for your worth. You no longer panic when things go off script, because you are your foundation. And foundations don't shake just because the weather changes. This is how you win. You win by mastering yourself. You win by realizing that peace is not the absence of problems. It's the absence of reaction to problems that don't deserve your peace. That's the difference between growth and stagnation, between noise and legacy. Growth requires silence. Legacy requires focus. And both require the ability to not react when everything in you wants to. So the next time someone tests you, remember, it's not a threat. It's training. Every trigger is a test to see who's really in control. Every insult is an opportunity to reinforce your discipline. Every moment of pressure is a moment to prove to yourself that you don't break, you build, you rise, you level up. You take the tension and turn it into strength. That's what separates those who just exist from those who evolve. And when you evolve, you change the game. You're no longer playing by the world's emotional rules. You're setting your own. You're no longer driven by reaction. You're led by vision. You know where you're going, and you're not letting anything small distract you. You've made a decision to stay grounded, to stay focused, to stay unbothered by the noise. And that decision is shaping a future most can't imagine. Because when you live from peace, you build from power. And from that power, nothing is out of reach, not success, not freedom, not greatness. Everything becomes possible when you're no longer controlled by everything. Everything changes when you decide to respond, not react. That's the moment you stop living small. That's the moment you start living with intention. That's the moment you take control of your story and you write it with clarity, with purpose, and with unstoppable momentum.